Yes, yay! Welcome to Crypto Underground's seventh anniversary event. It's super exciting to have you all here. My name is Ahalia. I'm curious who here is at a Crypto Underground event for the very first time? First time? Woohoo! Okay, is anyone here someone who's attended one of our very early events from 2017? Yeah, George. Nice. Hello, hello. I think we have a few people outside too that also were at our original event. So it's so lovely to see new and old faces. I want to tell you a little bit about how we came together because it's a great story and it really is the spirit of Crypto Underground. A group of us that were honestly in a Facebook group online talking about crypto in 2017 realized, wait, we're all in the same city. Should we meet up in person? And so we ended up meeting one night. I think we ordered pizza, and it was literally in a basement, an underground level of, I remember the address, 414 Brannan. And it was maybe about 30 of us or so. Most of us didn't know each other in person. Um, and it was very disorganized. In my background, I'm an executive coach and facilitator, and it was driving me crazy that, there were all these really brilliant people in a room, but there was no organization to it. So it ended up that there were some whiteboards in the room. Upstairs was a co-working space. So they had some whiteboards. So I grabbed a whiteboard marker with about half of the group. And then Miko was the other person who was with the other half of the group. Now, Miko has a technical background and knows a lot more about crypto. I knew pretty much nothing about it, but was really fascinated by it. And we just ended up having this conversation. I can't remember, half of us were talking about one thing and the other half were talking about something else. And at the end of it, people loved it so much. They looked at Miko and I that were also just there to meet with people and said, hey, can you guys do this again? Like, this was awesome. And so the next week we met up again at the same time, same place, and we kept doing that. And that was how Crypto Underground started. And we just kept growing and more people came. And at some point, we took it up one level and we decided, you know what, let's invite some speakers that actually know something about a particular topic. And that was how this format started getting created. We had speakers and then we had panels. And it's just really wonderful to still be going with such a vibrant community. We have about 2,000 people that have come to our events here and there over the years. And we have a lot of people that also visit us from all over the world. Whenever they're in San Francisco, they come. So it's really lovely, again, to have new and old faces here. And at some point, I left San Francisco, and so we had a new leader, Tegan Klein, who unfortunately wasn't able to make it today. But she has been somebody who spearheaded many of our events. You've probably seen her. Her story is wonderful because it's really the spirit of Crypto Underground. She was from Wall Street, interested in crypto, got her first job through somebody she met at a Crypto Underground event. And I'm really proud of her. She is now the CEO of Edge and Node. She's a crypto speaker. She is really a tour de force. If you don't know her yet, I encourage you to get to know her. And she is now our outgoing leader. And I am so excited and thrilled to introduce our incoming leader, which is Alejandra. She's going to be up here in just a moment. Yes, let's give her a round of applause. Absolutely. So Alejandra and I first met actually during the Clubhouse beta days some years ago when she was involved with a project called Crypto Babes. And then she became a volunteer with Crypto Underground. Now, Crypto Underground is fully volunteer run. And we, managed to pay for our food and things like this with sponsors, wonderful sponsors. And she has been a volunteer with us for a couple of years. She's grown as a volunteer and she's really demonstrated some great leadership skills. And she wants to foster community. She wants to give back to the crypto space, which is really why we all come together so we can learn and grow together and support one another in the space. And we are just really excited to have her here. And, something about Crypto Underground that people tell us about and continue to come back for is that we are a place for high signal, low noise, and a place where people just genuinely want to support one another. So we hope that you meet some really cool people today. And we hope that, somehow you'll surely learn something from the panel, but learn from each other, support one another, and keep the spirit alive. And in that spirit, before I bring Alejandra up to take over for the rest of the night, I encourage you to just talk to the person next to you, tell them your name and perhaps why you came here tonight. So just take a moment to do that.
Okay. I hope you met. Hello, hello. Yeah, we got them talking. Yeah, so hello, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm sure you met somebody very interesting today. Hello. We're going to get started, everyone. We're going to get started. Okay.
If you can hear us, clap once. If you can hear us, clap twice. If you can hear us, clap 3 times for everyone else that's still talking. Okay, thank you.
I didn't want to do that. I used to be a teacher, and we used to do that with little kids. But hey, it works. It works. So hi everyone. Super excited to see old and new faces. Actually, been coming to House of Web3 for a few months now, so I recognize a lot of faces. But it's also great to see a lot of people that I don't know. So if you don't know me, my name is Alejandra. Fun fact: the first crypto event I ever attended was a Crypto Underground event in 2021. So a bit of my background: I actually went to school to be a teacher, like I mentioned. I graduated during COVID, where no teachers were being hired. So I had a little bit of Bitcoin, and a friend of mine's like, "Oh, why don't you?" And my dad lives in Silicon Valley, so everyone's like, "Why don't you just check out the crypto events? Like you like it?" And I'm like, "Okay." So I started to show up. That's where I met Tegan. That's where I met the Crypto Underground, and I've been coming back since then. So it's been really awesome. And I started doing events actually for fun, and it's been really amazing to see how Crypto Underground and a lot of the community have helped me. And now I do a lot of Web3 events with different companies. So it's been all through Crypto Underground, which was my first exposure. So I'm super grateful for that. I do really want to thank our volunteers that are making this event happen. Like um, this community is all volunteer run. Nobody gets paid. So that's really awesome. I want to thank our founders as well. And I want to thank you guys for coming. So thank you so much for being here. Um, but I also want to introduce Miko as well because he's one of our founders. And since meeting him, I've learned so much from him. He's one of the early pioneers in the crypto space, really early on. And it's been really awesome to learn from him, see him as a mentor, and he's really helped me a lot grow in the crypto underground space and help me find speakers when we do events. So I'm really, really thankful for everything he's done for the community. So I'm excited to have both of our founders here. If you don't know them, make sure you talk to them after the event. They can tell you a lot about how this started and where it's going. And if you want to get involved either as a volunteer or want to sponsor any of our events, talk to me as well after. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Alejandra. So yeah, my name is Miko. I'm one of the co-founders here, actually, and I just really want to be very brief because I want to get to the meat of this evening's content, right? Which is we have a really amazing panel here for you to talk about the intersection of AI and blockchain. AI basically intersects everything, and AI will change everything. I don't know if you guys know, but I do have a master's degree in computational neuroscience from Yale University. Definitely was studying kind of Rummel, Hart, and Hinton before it was cool, right? Back when it was backpropagation networks and not deep learning. So, it's stuff that I've been following for a while with great fascination. And to me, like, one of the things that I'm really excited about with respect to AI, obviously, is that we seem to have gotten to an interesting place. Like, I think language models have converged in a way that none of us expected. And you can go to top AI researchers and they'll be pointing at it and being like, I'm not really sure why it's doing that, which is a really great result. It's an exciting result. So, for sure it's going to change everything. The thing that I think is really, really important to contemplate is whether or not AI future becomes AI utopian future where we have essentially an abundance of attention and an abundance of caring and an abundance of concern, right? Or we have dystopian, where we have an abundance of extraction, an abundance of adversariality, right? An abundance of so in a sense, the intersection of blockchain and AI is one of the promising domains where we have an infrastructure blockchain that's designed to address hyper adversarial use cases, right? And that the entire field of cryptography is really designed to address adversaries and to kind of try to control adversaries and in fact prevent adversaries, right? So I think that our goal today as a panel is to really talk about ways in which we're starting to make inroads on successfully developing infrastructure that will help us move towards a more utopian AI future as opposed to the dystopian AI future. And in order to moderate this panel, we have Stephanie Simon, and she is the founder of the tokenomics blockchain conferences, but also the founder of the recent V5 AI conference here in San Francisco. So definitely a moderator that understands both domains very well. So I'll hand it off to Stephanie to begin moderating this panel.
Wow, thank you, Miko. You oversold my crypto-ness a little bit there. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm Stephanie Simon. I'm really excited to be here. As Miko mentioned, I just wrapped up putting on a big conference for VCs. My background in another life, I had a crypto conference called Tokenomics, which was based in Thailand. I was living abroad there and saw that there was a need for people to come together to talk about this stuff. They were super excited. It was late 2016, early 2017, and so decided to start an event. But I was more of the person sort of facilitating conversations, helping bring people together. Definitely not the expert. So I am here to learn just along with everyone here. And then I eventually broke into venture capital, which is what brought me to San Francisco. And I spent 2 years working at Scrum Ventures before I decided to leave and start my own event series again. So if I accidentally say the intersection of AI and VC, just know I've been having like nightmares about that intersection for like months before my conference. So I'll try to make sure I say AI and Web3. But anyways, all right, so let's go ahead and get started. So basically, I thought it would make sense for everybody on the panel to kind of just give a brief introduction about themselves. Not about your company just yet, because we will do that afterwards, but just a brief introduction about yourself, and then we'll take it from there. So why don't we start with Michael?
Hey everyone, super excited to be here. So introduction about myself, I'll start with the professional stuff. So I started out as an engineer, was at Microsoft and SAP Labs, and then moved on closer and closer to the business side, became a technical product manager, and then afterwards worked for Bain & Company, consulted Fortune 500 tech and finance companies. After that, worked for Bridgewater Associates in portfolio construction, saw about $60 billion worth of trades on a daily basis. Pretty interesting kind of environment to be in. After that, went to graduate school at Stanford, and so moved back to the Bay Area at that point. Started my first Web2 company called Garten, scaled that to about, over the years to 650 people, raised about 130 million in venture financing, so became a top YC and unicorn company. And then late 2022, I got a call from one of my classmates saying that he invested in a company called Conflux, which is layer 1 blockchain with a highly technical team, and they wanted to do something more global scale. And so after 6 months of co-founder dating, then decided these are the best engineers that I've ever worked with. We need to start something together. And so we'll talk more about zero G Labs, or zero gravity as it's also known. On the personal side, really big into spiritual pursuits, to try to do about 2 to 3 hours of meditation on a good day. Also do things like Shaolin Kung Fu, and yeah, so you can ask me about that later. Quick background.
Hey everyone, my name is Olev. I got into crypto as a commodities trader. I started my career touching a bunch of products on the trading and modeling side, focused on gasoline, crude oil, and then carbon derivatives, which got me really excited. Super illiquid market, very similar to a lot of things in crypto. I left my trading job to start a DeFi structured products company in 2021. We were built on Solana. We spent about 2 years doing this, and we're really excited to kind of build some of the first derivatives and non-spot products on the Solana blockchain, and then started working on a consumer wallet called Otter. Otter was basically built to build the Venmo for crypto, which is a product that I saw as a giant hole in the ecosystem and I still see as a hole. In December of last year, we were acquired by WorldCoin, and where I spend most of my time building the World app, which is the native consumer app that most people use to access the protocol. And yeah, excited to talk about WorldCoin and a lot of the other stuff that I've been working on.
Hey everyone, I'm Ani. I work for Semiotic Labs, which is a core developer for Graph. We'll get into that in a second. My background is actually pretty different. I'm more of an academic. So my original field is actually in computer vision, focused on sort of medical imaging applications like X-rays, MRI, that sort of stuff. Moving on through a series of events, I actually ended up being a researcher in a field called multi-agent reinforcement learning. And just via some like interesting problems that existed in the crypto space, the intersection with multi-agent reinforcement learning, I ended up here. Yeah, and I trust these guys to pull the mic out of my hand if anyone asks me about my research interests.
I actually encouraged Anirudh to geek out, so I definitely encouraged him to go deep on the technical side. So I'm excited to hear from him and learn. So actually, my name is Miko. I'm actually representing a panelist that was unfortunately not able to make it, Ram from Layer Lens. But just in terms of my own background, like I definitely have fallen into the rabbit hole of AI. So I'm currently geeking out. At the way I framed it at the V5 conference was that I'm LARPing as a professional software developer. So I'm kind of running LLMs at home now. I'm basically doing my own projects, mostly telling ChatGPT what software to write, but it's definitely been a great excursion for me, and it takes me back to my roots in graduate school, as I mentioned before. So that's a little bit about myself. Obviously, strangely enough, I'm a co-founder of Crypto Underground, and so in my day job, I'm a VC, a managing partner with Gumi Crypto's Capital. We're a $110 million early stage venture capital firm. From a full disclosure perspective, our fund is invested in zero gravity. I always like to make sure that disclosures are very clear and upfront so everyone understands the various relationships.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about the projects that you guys are working on. Specifically, there are a lot of challenges at this intersection of AI and Web3, and each one of you are working on something that is helping solve one of these challenges. So I was hoping that you guys could maybe speak to first the challenge that exists and then how your project is contributing to solving that challenge. And we'll start with you, Michael.
So Zero G, or Zero G Labs, is the fastest modular AI chain. So there's a bunch of words in there, which I'll unpack in a second. But kind of starting at the high level, what we're really attempting to do, our vision is that you can run AI fully on chain. And what does that mean? So that you can run inference, you can run model training, you can run fine-tuning, you can run all of the data pipelines, data cleaning, getting the actual data, and so on. So that entire pipeline to be run fully on chain. And there's a number of issues related to that. We start at the data infrastructure side. So where do you even store the data in a fully decentralized context? How do you make it performant enough so that you can get data in time for various really high performance tasks? Then how do you get the data bandwidth to actually be commensurate with the requests? Like model training takes tens of gigabytes per second to do on large LLMs. best-in-class, what's known as DA or data availability systems today, do 1 to 10 megabytes per second on Ethereum, maybe 100 megabytes per second on Solana. So we're many orders of magnitudes off before we can actually get to that level of reality. Notwithstanding some of the research challenges, like how do you do batch training, how do you do asynchronous training, and so on. But even just at the kind of data bandwidth level, how do you solve that? So that's one aspect. And then how do you also scale to a particular request? Like because you have many nodes as part of a network, how do you make sure that if you have a request, like a storage request, that you can fulfill that really, really quickly, or an inference request, find the right level of resources and fulfill that really, really quickly, so that there's almost no gap between what a centralized experience and what a decentralized experience looks like. And so that's really what we're eliminating. We're eliminating that gap, so that the only differences are physical limitations. And by physical limitations, I mean things like speed of light. If you have many servers in a decentralized network across the entire world, you'll still have, even if you're using fiber, speed of light kind of issues. But there should be, from a latency perspective, very, very minimal if you don't have a lot of hops and so on. So fundamentally, that's what we're solving, eliminating those barriers for AI to live fully on chain. Now, then the question arises, like, why does that matter? Isn't centralized AI great? I'll give you a little thought experiment. How do you envision a world where you have a handful of companies essentially controlling all of AI, and AI is running most kind of societal systems, anything from mundane, let's say like trash pickups, to governance processes, to manufacturing systems? What does that future look like if it's fully controlled? So there's many moral hazards argument around that, and you could easily imagine a very dystopian world, as Miku kind of pointed out, where one of those players decides like, okay, well, maybe I have all this power now, maybe I should get 100% complete power. And so making AI a public good and fully on chain is a counter to that particular world, where all of a sudden you have completely different possibilities. So today, if you're an artist, for example, or a screenwriter in Hollywood, and an AI model utilizes your work to produce a derivative work, you see nothing from that. But what if there's a world where when you contribute on chain, you get a tokenized asset, and then every time some of that work is used in an agent, you can then actually get compensated for it. It's a much more fair distribution, much more fair reward system. What about alignment? Most alignment researchers, you ask today, like, well, how do we align super intelligent AI models? They're like, I don't know, we'll run a bunch of experiments and find out. Maybe we need to have these AI agents talk against each other and then come up with the best answer. The human decides. They don't really know. But in a crypto-specific world, you can have financial incentives, financial disincentives, and put AI models into a way where they can't cheat. A completely kind of different model of alignment. So, for example, one of the things we're thinking about is how do we create alignment nodes so that they consistently monitor the network and say, here was the expected behavior of the model, here's what's actually happening, this model is trying to cheat, what do we do about this? Do we have a slashing condition, do we take away incentives, and so on. So it becomes a much fairer world where AI can truly be a public good and we can enjoy abundance.
So one quick caveat before I jump into WorldCoin stuff. My co-founder and I was talking about the startup that got acquired. We recently left WorldCoin, but I'm going to be talking on behalf of the amazing project that I think it is. And I think to explain it, the main question is, if everyone's used the internet today, have you interacted with a bot? And I think most people's answers would be yes. And many people's answers would be, I don't know, how do I verify? So WorldCoin solves this problem of global inclusion for identity and financial networks. And the way it does this is with an underlying primitive known as proof of personhood, which is essentially a credential. Credential, like we have driver's licenses and we have little CAPTCHA checks on the internet. WorldCoin offers this really interesting program and product called World ID. World ID is proof that you're human, which sounds kind of weird, but is a very interesting and I think going to be a very successful solution in the world where we get into these like dystopian AI cases. So just to start off, maybe the best way to understand WorldCoin is by how do you interact with that as a human. So the way most people start is they download the World app, which is the app that I was working on the most of my time at WorldCoin. This app, when you download it and get started, essentially creates a key pair through a semaphore key pair generation ceremony. What happens here is now there's a public key and a private key associated with your wallet. So we actually create a multi-sig powered by Gnosis Safe on the back end that most users aren't aware of. This multi-sig is probably the first time 98% of our users actually touch crypto, which is one really awesome thing about the WorldCoin project, is it doesn't really limit itself to existing crypto native users. So once this happens, you go to an orb, which is a piece of essentially trustless hardware. Has anyone seen an orb before? If you have seen an orb, yeah, it's basically like this kind of beautiful spherical thing with a very fancy camera and GPUs attached to it. And what it does is it takes pictures of your irises, and if you're a human, you have irises. It does a check to see, well, first, are you alive, and are you a human, like from the face picture side? And then it turns these iris images into a code. If people have worked with hashing before, it kind of looks similar to this. And I guess where the AI part of this comes in is we have a set of very exciting models, which you can just pip install OpenIris to get, where you input this iris image. We go through the normal segmentation to figure out what the parts of the iris look like, to figure out the pupil, the sclera, the iris itself, normalization to put this onto a Cartesian plane, and then we go through some interesting future generation points where we essentially turn through this open source repo can turn the iris image into essentially you can think about it like a QR code or a matrix of binary, which flattens down into the iris code. And the iris code is a unique identifier that says that you're a unique human generated from this unique iris, and now will be inserted into a set on chain, which is stored as a Merkle tree. So now to zoom out a little bit, like what does all this mean? This Merkle tree essentially is hashed all the way up down to the root, and then that root is put on chain. But the most important part of what happens with WorldCoin is this iris code. And this iris code is your unique identifier as a unique human, whereby if you ever show up again to the orb to get verified, it will collide. And essentially this proves that no two humans can exist in this set together. All this goes to say is most of the users interacting with WorldCoin probably don't understand this, but if you are very curious, like I think WorldCoin has some of the best docs in crypto, so if you do want to read, feel free to jump deep into it. Once you do that and get verified as a human, which around 5.7 million people have done today, you receive a WorldCoin grant if you're in eligible countries, which is a one-time grant and then a recurring grant of 3 WorldCoin to keep you coming back to the app on a bi-weekly basis. And this creates a really interesting primitive because now any developer can access the World ID SDK to go and build products on top of this, or to leverage this giant Sybil resistance problem, leverage our solution against this giant Sybil resistance problem that we have in crypto today. This is a lot of words, so I'm sure there are going to be questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly editorialize and provide a little bit of context. I'm sure a lot of you in the audience already do know that the founder of WorldCoin is Sam Altman, who also founded OpenAI/ChatGPT. So I just wanted to make sure everyone in the audience understood the context, right? Which is that part of the vision of having a Sybil-resistant construct is really envisioning a future where AIs have effectively run rampant and have taken over, right? So the idea of being able to prove that you're human is really comes out of a vision of the future that's pretty well grounded in, the first principles. That's. I just want to editorialize a little bit to make sure people in the audience kind of got the context involved.
Great, Ani.
So I have 2 pitches for you guys. Starting with the graph. Hopefully people here know what the graph is. The graph is sort of this decentralized protocol to access Web3 data. The way the graph currently works is that you have these users that talk to a gateway. Gateway talks to indexers. Indexers index data off the blockchain, and sort of data gets passed back and forth. So I can send a GraphQL query to the graph. An indexer receives that query, uses their own index data, and serves that the data that you asked for back up. Actually, one thing that we think, and one way in which we want to reposition the graph, is that we think a lot of this infrastructure can be reused for more general compute, and in particular for AI inference and what we're calling the agent service as well. So these are 2 new services. We talk about them in a recent white paper we released. You can find that on the graph.com, I'm sure. But in the same way that we had this architecture of gateway to indexer to blockchain, you can picture a similar architecture for inference, right? You can have gateway to compute providers. Indexers are ultimately just compute providers, right? Currently, they are data specialists, they're database engineers. But in the future, we can envision more ML ops expertise coming into that space, and we have ways that we can incentivize that. That will then grab model weights, model architectures, let's say from IPFS, and then users can send queries to the graph. Users can send AI queries to the graph, and indexers, compute providers will be able to actually serve those queries. So actually, a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the tokenomics, just sort of transfers over very naturally to this use case for us. And so we see the opportunity to do this, but we also want to extend this in other ways, right? So I don't know if many of you guys have worked with Geo before. Geo is sort of this knowledge graph-based solution that the graph is building. So in the future, we talk about bad crypto documentation. People can put their documentation up on Geo, and we'll be able to connect that directly to our AI services to then query that documentation and run search on those things. And this can all be done natively on the graph. We can talk about a vector DB service or anything like this. And so if you guys haven't heard about Graph Horizon, this is all sort of built on top of this vision for the future of the graph, in which there are a lot more data services. We sort of expand our offerings. And then very tightly couple and integrate AI through that entire process. So it's very easy in the future for people to create AI dApps, even without necessarily the AI expertise. And so to do this, one of the things that we're pretty concerned about and we're going to be trying to figure out is we want to be very competitive in terms of price with Web 2 offerings, performance with Web 2 offerings. We want to bootstrap with models that people might be interested in. So if you have applications that you'd be particularly interested in, or if you want to host a model, come talk to me afterwards. But yeah, it's ultimately this vision of more and more tightly coupling the graph with AI. And can't get into too much more detail without some nice diagrams and stuff, so go read the white paper. Okay, so pivoting a little bit to my second pitch. So in addition to this effort in which we're trying to add more data services to the graph, the other thing the graph wants to do is become something like iGaming that other people can actually just build on top of and use GRT for their own sort of use cases. So Semiotic, my company, is actually looking to do something which we're calling Cambrian, which is a ZK coprocessing protocol. So one of the efforts that my team is involved with on the graph is actually to bring this verifiable flat files service, in which you'll be able to get verifiable data directly off the blockchain. Have the full process, like all the transformations to be verified, run that through verifiable compute, and then write those transactions back into the blockchain. The way I like to think about this, maybe this is the engineer in me, but I like to think about this as like a closed loop control system, right? So currently what we have in crypto is this very open system. It's just a feed-forward system. You have input, you take it off the blockchain, it's now gone. Unless you have an oracle or something you can use to tie this back on the blockchain. With ZK coprocessing, with any of these sorts of technologies, what you're able to do is that you're actually able to say, okay, well, I've used verifiable data as my input. Here's my proof for that. I've done verifiable compute. Here's my proof for that. I'm now going to write this data back into the blockchain. It's been verified the entire way. And you can't really easily do things like run LLMs on Ethereum, or even really through ZK coprocessing. People are working on that. And so I think this just opens up the door, hopefully in the future, to a lot more interesting types of computes that people can do on top of blockchains, all while remaining sort of in this verified circle. So those are sort of my two pitches, both one like very much graph heavy, the other one sort of leveraging the graph in this eigenlayer way to build this ZK compute thing.
Just a bit of editorial on the graph, right? Which is that, as you know, we're sitting inside of the edge and node house of Web3, and the graph itself has actually reached a milestone of full decentralization. So the graph itself there's no company, like it's just the graph, and the graph is like fully decentralized and autonomous. But the edge and node organization is actually a company that's responsible for development and responsible for stewardship and things associated with the graph, and they're the sponsor of this wonderful space, the House of Web3. So that's a little bit of editorial there just to contribute. So I'm here just to briefly represent the panelists that couldn't be here. Ram, and he represents a company called Layer Lens. So I just wanted to kind of quickly talk about their area of focus, right, which is they're interested in using blockchain for effectively testing and verification of AIs. And this is more of an enterprise use case. But the idea of using blockchain is that blockchain can actually serve as a reference source of truth for a set of prepared benchmarks, right? And effectively what can happen is that there can be tokenized incentives for people to develop benchmarks. And when I use the word benchmark, really the word benchmark is probably one of the most misused terms in AI, right? Because typically in classical compute scenarios, benchmarks are almost entirely focused on things like execution performance, right? So it's like, oh, what did you score on the benchmark? 200 or whatever. But, benchmarks in AI are actually mean a lot of different things. They can even have applications like alignment. They can have applications like cybersecurity. They can have lots and lots of different implications and applications, right? So the word benchmark is a very subtle concept. I think the thing that's really interesting is when you actually look at open source benchmarks, they're actually not working. They're not working right now because right now the most popular thing in the world is to beat ChatGPT on an open source benchmark and to say we're better than ChatGPT on this benchmark. The problem is AIs are very clever. And so what you do is you feed the benchmark into the AI and you say, learn how to beat ChatGPT on this benchmark. And the benchmark is take the same data, put it into ChatGPT, right? And so basically it just creates this closed feedback loop where the thing cheats, right? And so then you just make a big press release and say, we beat ChatGPT in this benchmark, right? It's pretty ridiculous. And when you actually go by hand, one by one, to these LLMs and you run them, they're almost all uniformly bad. Like they're not good. They just pretend to be good, right? So really, the concept of benchmarking in this space is actually broken. The incentives are broken. The system itself is broken, right? So I think that Layer Lens is an effort to try to incentivize the production of valuable benchmarks and to ensure the execution of verified benchmarks in a open source and incentivized blockchain context. So I just wanted to represent Ram's company and just say it's pretty cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Miko. Fantastic. So kind of on that note of incentivization, since you did bring that up, intellectual property was essentially created in our society. It was invented to reward creators for creating something of value. In other words, this is something I created that I own. If you want this milkshake, you better bring the boys to the yard, as in money, pay me, baby. And so, Michael, I want to ask you, like, when it comes to provenance, which is, in other words, like creating the link between the generated content and the original source of content, and providing proper attribution and incentivization, how can Web3 help with this?
Yeah, great question. I actually was just quoted on Forbes and Bitcoin.com on the same issue, because if you have fully on-chain AI, you actually have a full chain of provenance. Because if it starts with the data generation part, like, hey, I'm contributing some data, okay, now it's on the blockchain, then I'm going to do some cleaning, I'm going to do some normalization, I'm going to do some labeling. You see that entire trace. Then there's, where do I store this? Then there's the model training. You can exactly see how that kind of piece of data that was contributed moves through the entire system in most cases. But let's not get into edge cases. And then, when it's used in inference, then you can also still attribute, like, here are all these data pieces that led to this particular inference, essentially. And so that chain of provenance is something that blockchain really, really enables. I think is exciting because if you ask somebody from OpenAI today, like, which data did you use? They can't really tell you. And the other part to that is what we're starting to see is more and more walled gardens. So, for example, if you're on Reddit, you're contributing to some content on Reddit, that content, you're not benefiting from it. The Reddit's going to benefit from it because they're charging API fees, and OpenAI is going to benefit from it because they're charging OpenAI fees for using the model that was trained on the Reddit data. So, again, going back to this point of fair distribution of rewards with the chain of custody, that is actually possible. And so, super excited about building a world where that is, again, living into abundance versus kind of this dystopian future of nobody's creating anything anymore. AIs are creating everything, and major corporations are benefiting from it.
I love that. Thank you. So, how feasible is it in the next few years or so to really bring everything on chain, so to speak? Because I know this is a big mission for you guys. I know you spoke at Token 2049 in Dubai, and you were challenged on how feasible this truly is. So I wanted to give you sort of an opportunity to kind of bite back a little bit and talk about what we can truly expect when it comes to putting things on chain.
There's still challenges around performance, for example, on just inference. And there's different, there's challenges across the entire stack. But what we're eliminating is essentially all of the data infrastructure pieces. So you don't have to worry about storage anymore. You don't have to worry about kind of chain of custody anymore, because all the projects building on top of us, whether it's a large graph model builder or like Pond or a public AI that's doing data labeling and cleaning, you'll start seeing all of that propagate through the kind of transaction data. Now, there's challenges in the inference side. Like, how do you make inference as performant as in a centralized perspective? And there's many methods to do that. There's things like zkML, there's things like OPML, there's things like TEML. All of these are different ways of interacting and creating a verifiable inference, essentially. zkML, there's even FHEML, but let's not get into that. That's even further out. zkML has a lot of overhead associated with it, so you can only, in a feasible amount of time, if you don't want like minutes of delay between like, hey, this agent, go tell me X, Y, and Z, you don't want to wait multiple minutes for that to actually happen. You want that to be in seconds at most. And so the most practical right now is this thing called TEML. We can definitely dive into it more. I don't want to go too much into it. Then there's the whole fine-tuning aspects, like for example, our partners at Bagel are working on that. They figured out how to build a decentralized vector database and then do kind of fine-tuning through that through a RAG-based method that's performant enough. Still not quite the same, but over time, I think it will get there. Training is the biggest issue, I'd say. You can train small language models, but not large language models on chain yet. And so that requires both research on the AI side, kind of what I alluded to, like batch training and asynchronous training and so on. And then also our system actually has to run in full production to enable all of the data bandwidth there. So I'd say it's a few years away before everything can become fully on chain. But all of these issues are being tackled one by one. There's tens of builders building on our system now to tackle all of these issues.
Thank you. Nico, as an investor in the space, when it comes to these data moats that exist, or that a lot of the companies that you're looking at are proclaiming, this is what makes us defensible, we have this data moat. What are the pros and cons of, protected data versus open source data, and how does that affect the intersection of AI and Web3?
Yeah, so I think that data is actually the largest lever in the world, and I do want to say this, right, which is that, if you reason about sort of data, I think the Web2 people misunderstand data, even though they have all the data, right? So the biggest data holders in the world don't understand data, and I'll tell you why. This is the contrarian perspective, which is Facebook thinks. So this is the phrase that is wrong. The phrase is data is the new oil. That's the phrase. Dead wrong. It's just stupid. It's a bad worldview. Why is this bad and wrong and stupid? Because oil is a fungible commodity, right? If I have a barrel of oil over here, I can exchange it for a barrel of oil over there, and it's all homogeneous, right? So it doesn't matter which barrel of oil I have, right? And if you're Facebook, if you have my PII, my personal identifiable information, right? Basically, they can make $100, customer lifetime value on top of my information, right? And they're going to look at Ani's data, right? And they're going to say, oh, I can make the same amount of money on his data, right? So Facebook has this concept that data is basically completely fungible, and you can get an average revenue per customer on top of any customer, right? it's just it's ridiculously wrong, right? The thing that's really interesting is that when you really understand data and history of, if you go back into the history of cryptography, there's a linkage between cryptography and battlefield communications, right? It turns out that military applications of cryptography have been around since cryptography, right? And so my point is that a 1 or a 0 can change a battle, right? Can change a war, can change the fate of a nation, right? That's one bit of information, right? So my point is that data is not fungible. It is not a commodity. It's really scarce, right? And that certain data is super, super valuable. And I think that that's where we're going. And that comes back to your original concept around the creator economy, right? Which is, you were saying creators, right? You know, the stuff that I do is worth X, very small amount, right? And the stuff that Taylor Swift does is worth a heck of a lot, right? So like, that's my point, is that like, we're definitely going to get into the real dynamics of data, the real value of data. And I think securing, controlling, and understanding the value of that data is going to be the project of the future. And I think blockchain is going to play a huge role.
Is this the right move for society as a whole, though? Because, when you have open source communities with data available to everybody, there's lots of progression and transparency, right? But when you have these protected data moats and everything's private and not as transparent, yes, it's a more secure investment strategy because you've got something that's more defensible for the founder you're investing in. But how does this affect society as a whole? Is this good for society?
Well, I think that there are naturally open data sets, right? Like, for example, the Bitcoin blockchain, open source data, right? And then there are kind of naturally proprietary data sets, right? So to me, like, I do think that there will probably end up being some requirement for regulation around which becomes which. But I would say that in the long run, the thing that's really interesting about this revolution is that, data is going to be the game changer, right? Because in a sense, the data exhaust of humans is something that is proprietary to the humans. And I think that individual privacy and data sovereignty is going to be part of the future.
Oh, go ahead, please jump in.
I guess there we go. To answer your question, like, is this something that we can achieve in the world, or like, how would we achieve this? This being, I guess, some sovereign ownership of your identity or your data. I think WorldCoin is like a great example of what we attempt to do in solving this. And the core problem in my mind, to what both of y'all are saying, is attribution, and how do we ensure that a human who's provided valuable training or post-training data and like fun startup idea, like go try and build a token incentivized RLHF program and see, can I get real people on this network, and can I fairly incentivize this human to contribute in a way that's unique from other humans? Like, this is a really interesting idea, but I don't know if it can make any sense without a way to attribute things. And if you can attribute things, then you need to have full trust that this mechanism of attribution is Sybil resistant. So another soft show for WorldCoin, but the main idea being, like, I think this is possible in a non-dystopian way, in a way where people can actually benefit from uniqueness by having a really strong attribution layer. And now this comes against kind of the Web2 ethos, where maybe it's all controlled by 5 people, and everyone in Web2 is yelling about data wall, while all of us in Web3 are just like, how do we make this thing work, and how do we put the right incentives on it? So I think it is very much solvable, and there's a lot of opportunity for there to be real and usable attribution marketplaces. And it's kind of a weird word, because like attribution marketplaces you normally think of as like, oh, let me go to like Google or Facebook ads and see how much I can spend to get this like $100 LTV user. But I think that changes a lot once attribution hits with things like proof of person.
And let me jump in and editorialize a little bit, right? Which is, there's 3 legs to the AI stool, right? 3 legs are compute, right? The big players own them. Like, they have all the compute, right? The second leg of the stool is talent. Big guys control a crazy amount of the talent, honestly. Let's be real, right? How many startups have the best AI talent? Not that many, right? They have great blockchain talent in often cases, right? I would say the third leg of the stool is data. Data can be self-sovereign. Like, that's where the revolution happens, because it happens in the data, right? Like, we can control the data, right? The other stuff, cat's out of the bag. Like, the big guys have that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yep. Go.
can just add a quick data point too, because even large LLMs are running out of data to train on. So then you have to start thinking about synthetic data. And how do you best incentivize synthetic data? Well, blockchain has lots of incentive mechanisms to make that happen. So I've seen a number of projects now trying to tackle that issue, actually creating very high quality synthetic data use cases and actually sources. Meso network, Drop network, probably you've never heard of them. It's there to generate high quality synthetic data through an incentive mechanism.
For training. For training.
For training specifically. Yeah.
Thank you. So, Udab, you kind of touched a little bit when you were responding on identity, and I have a really serious question. So, I have been really cringed out lately by a lot of these auto-generated posts on LinkedIn. They're really. Raise your hand if you've also been cringed out recently by somebody's LinkedIn post. Yes, it's bad, and the comments are even worse. So, what I want to know is, when it comes to a content perspective, we want to see that content is being written by actual humans. Maybe there's an element of GPT that gets involved to sort of edit, but at the end of the day, we don't want just like auto-generated types of stuff. So how does, what are your thoughts on like how that can be solved for with the integration of Web3 and AI and maybe WorldCoin's role in that?
Yeah, I can't really. I don't think I'm qualified enough to comment on the model interpretability side of things. Where it's like, do we know that this is like human or non-human generated content? But the part that I think is much more intuitive to me is just a blue check mark for the world. I think that people normally understand the blue check mark on Twitter. It's been something that everyone has loved or hated at some point, and it makes sense. Like, it's very simple that a person's account can have this, and maybe there's a world in which every tweet or post you make, whether it's on Twitter or Farcaster, can have some attribution behind it, so you can maybe even go see like a transaction hash on chain or see some form of signature to prove that the person who created this content is 100% verified as human, or even verified at a different level, right? Like one of the things you can do is verify that their device was unique, or that this person has like uploaded a passport or something like this, right? So there's many different credentials that can be created, and I think where it makes sense to bring the blockchain is like, okay, well, how do we attest that this is true? Blockchain's great for things because it's transparent, so you just sign something and then you know the public key of the signer, and then you can go and look up to see what the message that was broadcasted and was signed. So in my mind, there's a lot of networks that are getting close to this. I think Farcaster is a more recent example. It would be awesome to see Farcaster integrate World ID to have a really smooth way of knowing how much of this is real active users and how much this is real active humans, which is kind of funny. And the way I've learned to change my way of thinking about usership in the last 6 months has been, is this a user? Is this a human user? And it's like, you wouldn't really expect yourself to make this distinction, especially in Web2, where everything is like, you have more monthly users and daily users, but once you really filter it down with proper attribution, I think you now become, interesting world.
I think connecting it back to your original idea around incentives, like one thing that might be a really good revolutionary movement would be to invent a hashtag like, stop fake posts or something like that. And basically what you could do is you could potentially tag a post as fake, right? And then you could basically create a cultural incentive for everyone to stop following any person who has that post comment on there. And obviously that could be used in a hyper adversarial way, right? Like someone could just constantly put fake posts on every single post a person makes just to try to destroy their reputation, right? So, obviously it's imperfect, but I do think that like that would be a really interesting cultural defense system against people just spamming fake AI posts.
Yeah, that's savage. Go ahead. Yeah, Ani.
Here we go. So if I can just add to that real quickly. So one thing we actually see in reinforcement learning is that agents, and I'm going to call humans agents as well in this case, actually take on a lot of the characteristics and just find sort of holes and vulnerabilities in the systems that they're working on top of. Right. So there's a famous example of reinforcement learning where I think it's actually OpenAI. Back in the day, they were trying to do this, teach agents how to play tag, basically. They were doing this in a Unity 3D environment. And what they did was they trained the agents. They had a team that was trying to play hide and go seek tag, and then there was the other people who were the actual taggers. And the agents just found bugs in the code that they could exploit. So they learned that they could hop on top of boxes and surf on top of the boxes and jump over walls that the other agents would construct, and all these sorts of things. So I actually don't think it's purely about just attributing things to humans or not. I think it's a lot more about just building systems that are more fundamentally resistant to these types of things.
And I think the whole World ID kind of fundamental, like iris-based identity system is exactly that, right? Which is first principles. Like, this is definitely not a machine.
Yeah, thank you. Ani, I kind of want to double click a little bit on what you're working on. So scalability remains a significant issue for current blockchain networks. What AI-driven solutions are being developed to address the scalability issues that we're currently experiencing?
So there are a few different ways I can answer this question. So one, I think, is just to say that I don't think it's as much of an issue as people think it is. I think people right now, when they say AI, they're hyper-focused on large language models, and those have scalability issues. I think, just out of curiosity, if you can raise your hand, is anyone here a reinforcement learning person? Anyone have a background? What's the largest RL model you've ever trained?
They're not that big.
Yeah. The RL models are still pretty powerful. I mean, they're not perfect, but my point is just that you don't have to have these massive models necessarily to actually solve interesting problems. And so I guess the first way I'm just going to answer that question is that if we just pull back a little bit and stop thinking about AI as LLMs, a lot of that problem disappears. And I still think there's a lot of interesting stuff that we can do within that space. And I talk about this more in the appendix of the white paper I mentioned before, which is actually my favorite part.
I do want to kind of give you a softball too, right? Which is that when we really think about solutions from a multi-agentic perspective, one of the really interesting things that arises is essentially the power of diversity, right? Just the power of having LLM-based agents and non-LLM, like every single possible kind of learning system, and humans, right? To be able to create kind of a really heavily multi-agentic with a lot of diversity. So that feels like an optimal steady state.
Yeah, I agree. Different models are good for different things, right? I think one of the classic examples people always give is that when you ask ChatGPT about quantum physics, well, the people who are doing RLHF for it didn't know about quantum physics. They, ChatGPT learned to replicate some answers that look like it's quantum physics, but it's not accurate. So it would be much better if you just had a model that specialized on quantum physics topics and could answer questions about that, or could do calculations or whatever it is. So there are multiple pieces that we would want to tie together. So you could have this LLM serving as an interface to this quantum physics system, which then might take the output, pass it to something else. And I think that's a lot more interesting of a system, a lot more scalable, both in terms of how we develop them, because now we're no longer dependent on big players for compute or anything like that, right? Now we're saying we have a bunch of smaller agents. They're all individually specialized and all individually know how to sort of their area, their expertise. And this is easy to develop in a decentralized way, because one of these agents might be very useful to me, and another might be very useful to you. So you go develop your thing. I'll develop my thing. And at the end of it, we can link these two things together. And it's not that simple, but I'm just giving you an example of. You can build sort of these massive systems, these much smarter models, by just starting with individual sort of expert models and connecting them in interesting ways. Maybe a bit of my bias as a multi-agent person there.
That's really validating to hear. I had a feeling ChatGPT didn't know everything. When I ask for relationship advice, it always sides with my husband. So I figured, there's got to be some glitches there. Okay, so besides identity, being a problem that blockchain could solve for, we live in a world today where deciphering between what is real and what is not real is becoming increasingly more and more difficult, not just from a human identity perspective, but from the information itself. I had something like this actually happen to us recently. How many of you guys watch Squid Games? The reality show. I mean, both the original Korean show is amazing, but there was also a reality show that came out. My husband and I were super excited about this show. We really, really loved it. And we got really, I got super excited about the show, and my husband kind of prides himself to deliver breaking news. Like, he told me when, Chris Rock or whatever got slapped, like literally like within seconds of it happening. And so he runs in and he tells me, oh, Squid Game season 2 is coming out. And I got so excited, and we literally planned our whole day around it, only to realize that it was fake news. So I was devastated by that. And this is a very serious problem. So what I want to know is, how can blockchain create a ledger of truth, so to speak, in an era where generative AI makes it easier than ever to distort that truth? And specifically, I would also like you guys to touch a little bit on this in relation to like our upcoming election cycle. And, in an ideal world, if we had all the initiatives that blockchain brings to the table enacted, what could the world look like? But what might it actually look like?
So I would love to kind of take the venture capital hat on, right? Which is, from my perspective, there's a number of perspectives on the panel that I think are representative of really important ways in which we can arrive at this true internet and not the false or fake internet, right? So obviously identity is core, self-sovereign data is core, right? And obviously data provenance is core, right? These are all these core systems, right? Because ultimately, and also when you look at systems like the graph, like the thing that's the fundamental property of on-chain data is that it's subjected to consensus, right? The thing that becomes really interesting is when you start injecting oracles, right? Because an oracle can bring off-chain data on-chain, right? And that the oracle becomes a form of consensus, right? Which basically asserts a truth. And so to me, what I'm conjecturing is that there will be some kind of blockchain that represents almost like what I would consider to be something I call a Pareto consensus reality, right? Which is that the Pareto principle is 80-20, right? So it's really that 80% of humans agree that this is reality, right? And 20% are basically like, no, it's conspiracies and it's fake, right? But to me, what will happen is that this will be the steady state, right? Which is that there will be a competition by blockchains to become the consensus reality. And that the best oracles will be the ones with the best oracles will be the ones that will capture everybody's attention and become kind of the consensus reality, right? So I think that's kind of the eventual steady state. I don't think there will be a universal reality anymore. I don't think there will be a single reality that everyone agrees on. Like, I think it's just going to be a competition for a Pareto consensus reality that 80% of people believe. That's sort of what I think is the final state. So I think it has to do with on-chain data and then oracles and then basically a fight. Now, when you talk about election data, one of the sources of clean data that's emerged on chain is actually Polymarket, which is effectively prediction markets, which kind of do drive sort of a verifiable reality and prediction of that reality, which I think is interesting. That's an interesting new way of ascertaining what's true and false.
Anyone else want to jump in and kind of add their thoughts? Ani?
I'll just do a quick two things. One, go check out Geo if you haven't on the graph. It's very much related to what you're talking about in terms of getting the community together to put data back on chain. And then the second thing is that I'm not an expert in this, so I won't speak on it, but there is an entire field of AI dedicated to this. Actually, one of the keynote speakers at AAAI last year was talking about this. It's called AI ethics, which is sort of a very philosophical name, but it deals with a lot of these sorts of issues.
Thanks. You mentioned ethics, which is actually a really great pivot into my next question. So this is for Udav. What are, obviously with WorldCoin, this could be something that people might be worried about. What are some of the potential privacy concerns with using biometric data, and how does WorldCoin address that?
Yeah, I think WorldCoin has gotten a lot of questions from normal users, regulators, and a bunch of other parties as to what happens with this data. And when I was walking through the pipeline earlier, I kind of talked about this, like we go from segmentation to iris code generation. The actual biometric data, or the images of the iris and the face, are deleted before anything happens with the iris code, from my understanding. So what's happening is these pictures are taken, an iris code is created, images are deleted, and then the iris code is sent to the database and then on chain. So a really important part of this is like how can we verify that this computation has happened? And then how can we verify that the hardware of the device is secure itself? So WorldCoin has published a lot of information about this. I'm definitely not the expert to be addressing this, but there's a ton of really good content out there to understand how WorldCoin responds to both regulators and users about data privacy. But it's a huge
I do want to say that one of the big problems with this type of paradigm is that there actually is no cryptographic proof of deletion, right? Because you can't actually prove that you deleted something. Like there isn't a way to do that. So provable deletion doesn't exist, right? Because obviously there's always out of band replication mechanisms, right? Like humans can see it or they can take a picture of the screen, right? So you can't prove that you deleted it. I'm not trying to attack you or your system. I'm just saying that that's a fundamental concern and a reality of something that's inescapable.
Thank you, Miko. Okay, so we do have to wrap things up because we are running low on time. But I wanted to ask, do we have time for a couple questions from the audience? Okay. Okay, perfect. So yeah, let's go ahead and take a question.
Hello, everybody. So I'm super fascinated by this topic because, Miko, you touched upon a lot of things I've been doing for a long time and evaluating and caring about looking at protecting people's lives and ensuring we don't have a big brother surveillance society, but at the same time, what is the balance of the open data and so on. And some of the things that came up in your talk was, really this duality that exists around the public-private. There is like a need for us not to create a surveillance society, and I know WorldCoin is getting a lot of flack for that. And then there's also the flip side of like, oh, when robots and AI are actually generating biological tissue and combining it, how do we deal with the iris thing when you can have somebody's eyeball popped out and put onto a droid, and, or some kind of heat thing that would create the sense of aliveness. So I'm curious about the ongoing thought processes around that. And then just on this conundrum about the data, I think it's a confusing thing. And then I have one quick question for you. Oh, okay, all right, that's fine. I can ask that.
Sure, I can try to answer this as a really important caveat. No longer at WorldCoin, and I'm not a privacy expert, but I think WorldCoin is one of the most, if not the most, privacy preserving system in the world today, and is very ambitious towards a goal of being maximally compliant with all the regulations in the countries that WorldCoin operates in. I can't give a great answer because I don't think I fully understand the question, but I will definitely reference you to a lot of the content that WorldCoin continues to put out in terms of how it's privacy preserving. I think there's a whole side of ZK that we could go into to talk about how we make these systems kind of fault tolerant. Yeah, I think building defense against these like various attack mechanisms that one can make to try to spoof the system is a huge part of the focus of the AI and hardware team at WorldCoin. They spend a bunch of time simulating, testing, and I think like replicating these adversarial environments. There's a decent amount of literature published on this, but I think the iris is actually one of the biometrics that is not very well researched. I think like research kind of plateaued in maybe 2010, 2012 on what makes the iris too duplicative. But yeah, synthetic data is going to be a really challenging problem. I don't think we have an answer to that as a world yet, especially when it becomes like physical human synthetic data rather than like digital synthetic data. So.
Another question?
I just wanted to make a really quick editorial comment on that one, which is to follow up. Like one of the comments that Ani and I were talking about earlier is that there may actually be conditions under which non-human actors can actually be beneficial, right? So at some point there may actually, for example, things like penetration testing, right? So you could actually create a flood of white hats that are technically attackers, right? But they give the money back. Right. So to me, like the world of the future may not be completely devoid of bots, right? But it really may be that the bots there are permissible and non-permissible bots, right? So, but I still think in that world, we will need metadata that says this good actor is human, this bad actor is human, this good actor is a bot, this bad actor is a bot.
Hello, thank you so much. How are you all thinking about the environmental impact of blockchain technology? Are there any efficiencies happening?
Yeah, one of the comments that I wanted to make is the huge potential energy utilization problem, right? Which is that if you look at the human body, the brain consumes about 20% of the total energy output of the human body metabolically, right? So if you think about that from a AI perspective, if AI starts consuming 20% of the power output of human civilization, that's a lot. Like, that's a large number, right? And obviously, the point when I made this point earlier, one of the comments of the person I was speaking with was like, why stop there? Like, why shouldn't it be 50%? Why shouldn't it be 80%? Why shouldn't it be 90%? Right? And so to me, I think that's going to be a major issue. Like, there's no question about it. Like, if we want to coordinate all molecules on the planet using AI, like, we're going to need to spend a lot. And so to me, we're going to need abundant clean energy, or else AI isn't going to be utopian. And in fact, blockchain will not be utopian either. Nothing will be utopian if we don't have energy.
Kind of to echo to what you said, Miku, which is I think it's primarily energy generation type of issue. Of course, there's a lot of kind of losses, transmission losses throughout the system, and you can ameliorate those by having kind of local generation and so on that's fully sustainable. But blockchain, for example, besides Bitcoin and some other smaller chains, made the switch to proof of stake, which significantly dropped the energy consumption. I forgot what it exactly was, like 99 point something. Yeah, so very large reduction there, and so that's unlikely to kind of reverse course, and so definitely a lot less consumption, I think, on a per unit basis than centralized data systems, data centers even. And so I think there's some kind of contribution to making it more green, but I still think it's primarily a source generation issue. I think Elon Musk said you can meet all of the world's energy demand with some, I forgot, like X kilometers by X kilometers, like size of Texas. Okay, good. Easy to see. Size of Texas in the African desert, solar powered plant. Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, in the back.
Hi, question to Michael. So if I understand correctly, you're basically building the like a Byzantine fault-tolerant AWS, right? Like decentralized compute, decentralized storage, so that people can build application on top of it. So assuming that you did solve all these technical problems and that everything's very fast, how do you get a competitive edge over the big guys like Google, like AWS? Like, who is going to build on top of that? No, I get it. Like, if it's a financial application, you want this transparency, you want all these nice properties. But other than that, like, how do you, like, where do you see demand in other areas?
Where do I see demand in what areas? What do you mean?
Like, other than finance, basically.
Other than finance?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Well, so by using kind of latent hardware, so and just for the record, we don't do the compute pieces. We would do that through partners. So any of the kind of GPU systems. So there's many companies that do that: Akash, Render, Hyperbolic, Aether, IONET. There's like tons that do the compute side. So we partner with them, and then we just kind of have the decentralized serving framework. What we've built is really all of the data and storage infrastructure pieces right now. And so in both of these cases, when you use hardware that's underutilized, you can actually offer that service at costs that are up to 80% off versus centralized players, because you can remove a lot of the kind of overhead that centralized systems are charging. So AWS has a very large margin. If you remove that margin because you're using, again, kind of underutilized hardware, then you can offer a pretty compelling value proposition. And so really anybody across any industry can use that. And so we're starting on the Web3 side, but we've had like media companies reach out to us, for example. It's like, hey, we've got all this content we need to store, and we're very price sensitive to actually storing this content. And so we'd like a cheaper alternative. And not only is it cheaper, but it's completely fault tolerant, because if you need more security, you just either increase the number of replications that this particular data has, or you can even specify like where it's actually stored. Like, this is very sensitive data. It can only be in North America. Okay, great. As part of this network, you can only store it here. And by the way, if one of these servers crashes, then there's also fault tolerance built in, because you have multiple replications by definition on the network. And so there's a lot of benefits of it actually being in a decentralized context. And so we're starting to see inbound coming in from industries outside of finance as well.
Great, thank you. So I've just been told that we've officially run out of time, but I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining the panel. Thank you to the audience. Thank you for hosting us. Thank you, Nico and team. If we can give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.
Don't leave yet. We actually have a crypto underground tradition of pitching. But before that, I do want to make sure everybody has a paper in front of you that has some of our social media. We also just launched our Telegram. So if you are on Telegram, which I know you are, right? Don't lie to me. Make sure you join. This is an amazing community, and we're going to be sharing tons of things, including our upcoming events. Also, I do want to also thank House of Web3 for hosting us today. Walk around. This is a beautiful space. If you're interested in co-working from here, make sure to talk to somebody in the front desk, and they can give you more information. Also, if you want to sponsor any of our events or want to be a volunteer, talk to me. We are looking for volunteers and sponsors for events. Or if you know somebody, also talk to me. So we're going to start our pitching. So the way it works is you come in here and pitch anything. You can pitch your startup. You can pitch looking for a friend. Maybe you just moved here. Maybe you're looking for love. Whatever you need, just come and pitch, and we'll listen to you. But here's the thing. It's only 1 minute, so we're going to time you. You're going to shoot next. Okay? So line up. Whoever wants to pitch, the floor is here. We need more people. Come on.
Come on, guys. Let's go.
Come on.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Awesome.
Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Rich. I'm the co-founder of RPS AI. We're building a crypto foundational model. But before we get into that, I'd like to tell you a story. It's the year 2019. You and 3 friends are sitting in an apartment talking about how to strike it rich. One friend brings up Ethereum, $200 a piece, expensive. You ask, where do I buy this? Your friend says, there's a new platform that launched called FTX. You're like, are there any others? He says, well, there's also Uniswap, but it's really hard to get on it. So you opt into FTX, and he shows you the ropes, helps you onboard, on-ramp, make your first trade. A great friend. For the last 3 years, these types of conversations have been happening less and less frequently. As builders in 2024, we ask ourselves, how do we bring on new users? Is it the metaverse? Is it NFTs? Is it meme coins? RPS envisions a different future, where AI agents take the place of that trusty friend. Not only helping you how to onboard into the complex world of DeFi, but also helping you execute those actions permissionlessly and on-chain. We built up a custom AI model to help blockchain builders deploy these agents reliably and simply. Hit me up on Twitter, Richard King XYZ. Thanks.
Under 1 minute. Good job. He was worried it wasn't going to be under 1 minute. Who's next? I know a lot of you have great projects. Okay. Next. Now let's do it. Give it up.
I usually pitch these things. So, hi everybody. So, I am the founder of Noble Profit. We've created a technology called BFlow, which actually combines some of the features, and I'm interested in talking to you. And it's all around truth and understanding and connecting information around sustainability and climate to real-world assets and to real-world actions. We actually, I'm putting a call out. I could use a little help on something one of our devs has hit a little place where we could use some advice on combining a couple of the processes. So I'm seeking that support, and you can go to @bflow.tech to follow us.
Okay, so I have something somewhat different to say. I have spent the last year at an ashram. For those of you that are not familiar with an ashram, it's a place that typically people go to focus on spirituality. And I just wanted to offer, if anybody wanted to speak about that, if anybody wanted to learn a little bit more about meditation or yoga or anything like that, I'm happy to share. And also, if you happen to be a founder of a startup or an executive in a company and you do want to talk about leadership or effective leadership, or you're challenged by something, whether it's communications, a difficult relationship, you're not able to influence somebody that's really important to whatever you're doing, I'm happy to talk to you about that too. So you can find me. My name's Ahalia.
Looks like more people are getting inspired.
Hi everyone, my name is Victoria. I go by Wiki. I am a bioengineer, neuroscientist without a PhD, and I think I have a solution to help cure healthcare. So if you're interested about your health, if you love a pet, and you want your phone to tell you what might be wrong with your centralized medical data, I have a solution for also renting out biopharma data without IP infringement for training models and uniting the public with information that can help cure you or others. So if you're interested in it, please talk to me.
Great. I think this is it. Thank you so much for coming. Make sure to talk to the speakers. They'll be here. And still get some drinks. We have a lot of drinks in the back. Thank you.